Hello. Welcome to Kindly Neurodivergent with Kay. This show is to spend quality time with each other, kindly discussing the similarities and wide range of differences we experience. The experiences we discuss on this show are for educational purposes only. Please do not substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Before we begin, I respectfully request that if you witness any pauses during this show, please don't stop watching. I'm composing a spontaneous comment or question. The guest can choose not to say anything while this is occurring. This is natural discourse when an augmentative and alternative communication device user is communicating with a non-augmentative and alternative communication device user. Today I have a professor of mine, Peter McConnell, to discuss good decision-making for people with mental health disorders, including substance use disorders. Peter McConnell is a certified addiction recovery coach and has been working in the behavioral health care field for more than 10 years. He has also been in the education field for more than 20 years, currently teaching college courses in economics and banking at a local community college. Welcome, Peter.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Please introduce yourself.
Okay. Kayla, thank you very much for, asking me to join you on this project. I'm honored to be here. To understand my perspective on mental health issues such as substance use disorder, it's important to understand that I have a substance use disorder. So in other words, I struggle with my mental health, and more so than just that. So for many years of my life, I made poor decisions, and suffer the consequences. Since I was able to enter a recovery lifestyle, I've been able to manage my life in a healthy way. And this is now what I do for a living. I help people learn how to manage their life in a healthy way. As you can imagine, after the pandemic, there's a lot of people who are struggling with mental health issues.
Discuss the difference between behavioral and mental health.
This is a tough question, because it's both, really, right? Health is health, physical health, mental health, behavioral health. They rely on each other quite a bit. What I do besides teach classes in economics and banking is I work in a facility for young adults or adolescents where we help them overcome mental health issues, including substance use disorders, which is where we got started originally. But also failure to launch issues and other types of things that affect people that are young, of a mental health nature. And so our objective is to help these young adults learn how to adult in spite of their mental health issues, and make sure they can manage those things, so that they can have a full and authentic life that suits them.
What is a mental health disorder?
So there's lots of different mental health disorders. For example, anxiety and depression are probably ones that most of us are familiar with. You can have, say, a clinical level of anxiety, or you can have a situational level of anxiety. But there's also things, so whether it's bipolar disorder, schizoaffective disorder, people with trauma, people that might be on the spectrum, people that have suffered from abuse and neglect, people also that, have just a lot of perception issues, or again, failure to launch issues as well. A lot of them come from really challenging, backgrounds. And so it's a complicated mix. Fortunately, the basics of what we're trying to do work well for everyone's mental health. So a lot. It's not. We try to individualize it and try to help individuals where they are. But at the end of the day, good decision making is something that is easy to replicate if you want it.
Is a substance abuse disorder a mental health disorder?
So it is. If you look at, and I'll speak for myself. This is very common when you talk to people in recovery. They don't typically tell you what you should do. They explain what they've done, and thereby could be a power of example. So, as a recovering alcoholic, I knew I was an alcoholic. I wanted to stop, but every once in a while, I decided, who cares? And I would drink again. So, and this continued for a very long time. So, this is not the functioning of a sound mind. And of course, if your brain isn't functioning properly, because it's been conditioned, to do something which I consider suicide on the installment plan, right? I was conditioned to do that. I chose alcohol like I would choose food, like I would choose shelter. It became that important. So that changes the way your brain functions at a very fundamental level. And it takes a lot of work to help it be able to change back.
Elaborate on the difference between addiction and a habit.
So, uh, I want to say this about my background because, Kayla, as you mentioned, right, seek professional help. Like I happen to work in the field and I have lots of experience, but I'm not a therapist. But I know a lot of therapists and I deal with a lot of people who are in therapy and I help them accomplish the goals that they have for therapy. So I'm very familiar with the terminology and so forth. But I don't want you all to take this as, gospel from the professionals. This is someone with experience. But you could say that there are some people that, again, using alcohol as an example, who might be problem drinkers. But if something happens, they get arrested, they get hurt, their relationship is on the brink of breaking up, they can stop because the need becomes great enough. People that have a mental health disorder would like to stop, but typically can't, no matter how great the need. That was true in my case. I had to actually be stopped. So there is a difference. It's almost impossible to tell who is, say, the problem heavy drinker or who is the alcoholic, because you don't have to drink every day to be an alcoholic. Um, and so we let the individual determine for themselves. I can't tell you you're an alcoholic, right? Nobody could tell me, that's for sure. But if I give you, the criteria and help you look objectively at your behavior, typically your behavior meets the mental health diagnosis for a mental illness.
Talk about substance abuse disorder.
Substance substance use disorder is or addiction, as we used to say, and it is a mental health condition. So I know for a lot of people who suffer from a substance use disorder, they may not like the idea that they have a mental health condition, but I do. It falls under that category. So I'm rereading the question. So, substance use disorders, though, again, it does, you don't have to inherit a gene, to have a substance use disorder. You don't have to come from, a broken home. Like no one in my family is an alcoholic, that I'm aware of. Didn't have a difficult childhood or anything like that. So for some people, if you use a substance, often enough, you'll develop a taste for it. It'll become a habit. And at some point, when it starts rewiring your brain, and I don't know where the line in the sand is, how far you have to go before you cross that line. But by the time I was even contemplating whether or not I'd crossed the line, I was years past the line. So most people don't. I tell people all the time, if you think you might have a substance use disorder, people without substance use disorders don't think they have one. Right. So if you think you might have one, you might have one, but I'm going to let the viewers decide whether or not they have one. So that's something that is quite different, because it's behavior that creates the mental health condition. right? Some, again, there may be a genetic predisposition to some of this stuff, but the idea is that it could be behaviorally induced. So I don't know why every one of the people I work with got to the place where they needed help to deal with their mental health disorders.
Why
But
both?
oh, I'm sorry, I was rambling there.
Why is it both?
It's both because it meets the criteria for both. So, like a mental health disorder is something that, continues, and, has a negative impact on your life. So if I was hearing intrusive voices, right, that would be called schizophrenia. That would have a very negative effect on my life. If I had anxiety that prevented me from having relationships or holding down a career, that would have a big negative effect on my life. If I really liked heroin, a lot, that I wasn't, able to go to work, or I started robbing people to feed my habit, that would really have a negative effect on my life. These are all mental health disorders. And the good news is that for most mental health disorders is that recovery is possible. You might need to do a few extra things to stay in fit, condition. But the idea is that I have yet to meet someone that wasn't capable of doing the work and having a level of success. Maybe not exactly what they wanted, but something that they can find acceptable and value. A life, we call it at work, build a life worth
Recovery
protecting.
coach?
A certified addiction recovery coach. So this is what my technical term is. The state of Connecticut has changed this certification. It's now a peer support recovery specialist. They changed the term because the peer support recovery specialist help a lot more people than people just with substance use disorders. So you might help someone, that's suffering from bipolar disorder. You might have someone that's, suffering from chronic depression. You might have someone who's, got a traumatic brain injury and is really trying to manage their anger now. You'd be surprised how various things have, show up in other symptoms. What we do is we really just, first try to help clients understand themselves. What exactly are you dealing with? Are we 100% sure? No, we're not going to tell you, but like, tell us about your symptoms. Let's figure out why these are causing problems, and let's figure out what behaviors that we want to replace, like inappropriate behaviors with appropriate behaviors. Instead of drinking down at the bar, maybe I'm going to, I don't know, join a bowling league,
Mm.
right? That kind of thing.
Why did you become a certified addiction recovery coach?
Well, before working at my current job at Turnbridge in New Haven, I was working as a school teacher in New Haven. I really like explaining things to people. This was part of my journey. Anyway, so being in recovery myself and finding that I have a flair for explaining things to people, it seemed like a good fit when it was suggested to me that I apply to this company by someone who was helping me with my recovery. Um, when I started at this organization, there were 6 people working there. We have over 400 employees now. And it's one of those places where it doesn't feel like work because it's really hard, but I really get a lot of value out of what I do. This is going to be a good one.
Just like how I do a lot of disability work volunteer.
Exactly. how it feels to get outside yourself and start talking to people about their struggles and their problems. I used to think I had the biggest problems in the world. Someone said that if everybody put their problems on a table, you'd probably want your own problems back. And so, yeah, I mean, I've had a rather horrible life by some measures, getting, arrested, divorced, injured in a fire, car accidents, and the arrests were multiple. But people who know me today, think that life is a breeze. And it is because I'm not suffering. I've been sober 16 years, so I haven't been creating wreckage for 16 years. So it's much easier to maintain, things like your budget when you don't have that much wreckage.
But it is still concern.
Yes. It reminds me of the commercial for the army. It's the toughest job you'll ever love. I know a lot of people who are not alive. There's another pandemic that we've had for a long time called the fentanyl pandemic, and people are overdosing, on opiates at much higher rates than they were even during the pandemic when it reached record highs. So, this is something that doesn't get talked about. And so I know a lot of people who succumbed to their mental health disorder. Most of the ones that I know that have passed away did so because of overdose, whether by accident or on purpose. But there's also a large number of suicides. And that's the real tragic, truth. And that's also the one of the reasons why this is so rewarding, because like I almost died several times. The people I try to help have a life-threatening condition, right? They're actively trying to burn their life to the ground for the young people I work with because they have never had, successful adult experiences. They've had adolescent experiences, sometimes not successfully. So, this is really uncharted territory.
How
And
do
once
you
you
become
learn,
a coach?
one more time, please.
How do you become a coach?
So, well, I went through the official certification process through my job. They wanted me to take the courses through the state of Connecticut certification board, which I did, and I became certified. That is really more for, so people can know that the individuals that work at my firm are in fact trained. We are in fact professionals, because if you look at my degrees, my degrees are in things like education and political science. So, having that certification, really does kind of back up the fact that yes, I'm not just a recovering alcoholic. I've actually studied these things. The best part about becoming a recovery coach, though, is the mental health um knowledge that I gained, what they taught me as part of that training. And I'll give you a quick example. People that suffer from really severe mental health issues, say schizophrenia, for example, where you might have really intrusive thoughts or really intrusive visions, or you hear things that are intrusive. By the way, hallucinations is still appropriate, but that's not the most appropriate term these days. So intrusive thoughts, I've been taught, is the way to go. Anyway, so when someone's in recovery who has this condition, they can write their own plan. So if their mental health suffers for one reason or another, maybe they get an illness. I know some people, they get say like an infection that can have a really damaging effect on their mental health. So they're not capable of telling us what they want and how they want to be cared for under these circumstances. And sometimes horrible mistakes are made with the best of intentions. So in recovery, you make your own plan. Hey, if I have a relapse in my condition, I want to go to this hospital and I want to talk to this doctor and I want you to call these people and like here's the medicines that work, and don't let them give me those medicines. So things like that, which are very practical, that's not a therapist. That's what a recovery coach does. So that's what coaching is about. Hey, let's game plan for the next time there's a problem. Hey, let's unpack, let's play Monday morning quarterback and what you did yesterday and identify all the mistakes. And not only identify the mistakes, but figure out why you made the mistake. Because a lot of people are aware of their mistakes. They have no idea why they're making them.
Explain what kinds of therapy help your clients.
This is exactly what therapy is for, right? To break down your thought process. But when I say your, I'm talking about just anybody. Um, so cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectic behavioral therapy, there's also trauma work and all kinds of various therapies. There's family therapies and group therapies and all kinds of things like that. But the idea is to, one, let's get a vocabulary. Like, what exactly am I experiencing? So I know when I'm angry, but do I really know when I'm afraid? Because sometimes I think I'm angry, but really I'm afraid. And what is anxiety, for example? And what were like the levels of anxiety? Now this is an area where I've been blessed that I didn't suffer from a lot of these other conditions. I now suffer from anxiety and panic attacks and so forth and things like that. So I know what that feels like. But I don't have a vocabulary to explain these feelings because I haven't felt most of them. But the idea is help the recovering person to understand not only what emotions they're feeling, like, oh no, you're not angry, you're actually afraid, and try to figure out how to manage them. So here's something a therapist told me a couple weeks ago. Um, if you have situational anxiety, you're living in the future. If you have situational depression, you're living in the past. Now, again, this is not clinical stuff. This is just, hey, if I'm like in my head about what people might think of me, right? That's anxiety, but that's anxiety that you can do something about.
Mm.
Right. So why are you so worried about how other people think about you? Like, that's a liability. Why would you give people the power to control you and to either ruin your day or make your day great? Why would you give away your power to people? So you got to stop caring about what other people think of you, right? In recovery, there's a saying, what other people think of me is none of my business. So this is how therapy works. We got to get into a discussion around what emotions you're feeling, talk about the practicality of those emotions, talk about what it means to succumb to your emotions and to permit yourself to behaviorally act on your emotions.
Mm.
Right. So, it's not so much about self-control. And I don't know if we're going to get to this later because, discipline,
Mm.
as was mentioned at the beginning, this is, what's really important because if I know my emotions come from things that are like silly, like I shouldn't have anxiety over how the people are going to view this video. And I don't. But if I did, and I'd be fumbling over my words and this wouldn't go very well, that would really inhibit my ability to do this or do a lot of other things. So I would want to understand why I get that anxiety, and
Now
I would
let me
try
talk
to
about mental discipline.
write
What
about
is
mental
that?
discipline. So I need to recognize where my emotions come from, recognize that I have um it's a choice. Now, I still get angry, right? I can't, like, you could slap me in the face, I'm going to get angry, but I'm not going to stay angry. If I stay angry, I might just drink over that. So I have to make sure that I don't stay angry. And by the way, you're not going to apologize. I'm not going to be able to control your behavior. The only behavior I can control is my own behavior. So if you did something to me that I don't like, it's now up to me to control my behavior. So the first thing I got to do is look at the way I look at you, right? I'm in recovery. I've done horrible things. I'm a real piece of garbage back in the day, right? Who am I to judge anyone? Right? Maybe someone else is suffering from a mental health disorder and their symptoms are what's getting me upset, right? Maybe they hit me or robbed me or something because they're mentally ill or because, they're suffering, from withdrawal symptoms or something like that. So I have to recognize that I can't control the other people and whatever happened has already happened. Typically I'll see if I can help them or maybe help whatever condition, so if I'm getting robbed by a homeless person. Well, maybe I need to volunteer at a homeless shelter, and help them so I don't stay angry. But then I have to still deal with the embarrassment of getting slapped. I have to, what are my friends going to think? Why did you do that to me? Do you think I'm like, a weakling? Do you think that I'm like not cool? I'm all in my head about what you think about me and what the other viewers of this program are going to think about me. This is a liability. So it's really hard to teach a young person, hey, that internet thing that you've been on your entire life? You shouldn't care what it says. You shouldn't care what anybody on Instagram thinks about you.
Mhm.
Do you know that the forward facing camera came out in 2012? Guess when the mental health crisis started?
Mhm.
2012, right? Started really around 2010 with smartphones, but it really took off around 2012.
How
Now,
does
was it
intelligence affect mental discipline?
how is this? Well, um, how is this related to mental discipline? I think that was the question.
Mhm. How does intelligence affect mental discipline?
So emotional intelligence, right? Do you understand your emotions? Because it takes no intelligence to have an emotion, right? Infants have emotions and they don't understand what's going on, right? So intelligence isn't a requirement to have an emotion. To have emotional intelligence, though, that's how you're going to get the mental discipline. So you have to understand, why am I angry? Does this make any sense? Like, am I angry because it's sunny out and I was expecting rain? So now I'm ticked off because the weatherman was wrong? Hello, it's a sunny day. Why would I be angry at a sunny day? But this is the way my brain works when things don't go the way I expect them to go. And when I have a substance use disorder, and by the way, a lot of people with mental health disorders, they use substances to self-medicate and they become dependent on those medications. So whether they're addicts or not, it's still a substance use disorder. And the point is, if I can't get my fix, if I can't get you to do for me what I need you to do for me, I'm going to have a fit and I don't know how to cope. And this is what I do for a living. I try to help people cope and learn what to do. So you got to have that emotional intelligence to understand what emotional state you're in and then figure out why you're in it. Because, like, I wouldn't be angry because you slapped me. I'd be angry because I didn't like what you did.
Like when the weather cancels an event.
Yes, yes. So resentment is, in Alcoholics Anonymous, they say resentment is the number one offender. Um, by the way, I'm just some bozo, right? Please don't put me on a pedestal. In Alcoholics Anonymous, we maintain our anonymity. I'm speaking as a professional in recovery. This is something that I encourage all my clients to do. I'm not a representative of AA. I'm representative of Turnbridge, and of how to recover. Anyway, um,
That's why and how attitude influence discipline.
so attitude is super, super important. They say that we had to be beaten into a state of reasonableness. I got sober when I was locked up, right? I wasn't capable of making good decisions, even though I wanted to. Because when push came to shove, the only way to stop all those little voices in my head that say, like, you should go get a drink, and like, well, just get one for later, and yeah, you never know, and no one's gonna know, and who cares? The only way to shut those people up was to take a drink. So that's why I was never able to stop. So when we look at, and I'm going back to your question now, the whether it's intelligence, emotional regulation, mental discipline, the idea is, if I can understand what I'm experiencing, then and if I can stop in the moment and not act on the emotion I'm experiencing and do the next right thing, even if it means like, oh, I'm so embarrassed, or I just hate this person, but I'm going to do the right thing anyway and not to act on the negativity, um, then you have a shot. Oh, but going back to your point, attitude, acceptance, acceptance.
Why is acceptance important?
Why is acceptance important? Perfect timing. Well, I'm not going to change unless I need to change.
Hmm.
Right. So, the way I ran my life in the old days, I did what I wanted to do. I didn't do what I needed to do. So if I didn't need to, stop drinking, then like end of story. So it's full stop. We're not going to talk about my disorders, in their relation to, substance use or anxiety and depression or anything else. I don't have the problem. Right. So that is the most effective way to protect your ability to use substances. Well, so let me give you an example of what I mean by acceptance. So we have clients in our young adult program who have self-medicated with marijuana, which is now legal virtually everywhere, just like alcohol, by the way. And so most of our clients, they really want to use their substance of choice, which for a lot of people is marijuana. So admitting that you or accepting that you have a substance use disorder, that means like you're not supposed to ever use that stuff again. But admitting that I have a different kind of mental health disorder, like, oh, I have anxiety and depression, maybe I can smoke marijuana to treat my anxiety and depression. By the way, it's usually not good for either. Typically it exacerbates both. But the point is that a lot of people, they'll accept a mental health diagnosis just so they can continue to abuse substances. And that to me is surprising.
Please tell us about some values that are important for a person in recovery.
Honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. That's HOW, right? So, and again, this is straight out of the old recovery language. If you can be honest with yourself, yes, I do have a problem. Yes, I need help, right? That's what I mean by honesty. Open-mindedness. Hey, my best thinking doesn't seem to work. I know what you're suggesting seems ridiculous to me, but I'll try it because I'm desperate and willing. And I'm willing to try things I don't understand because they worked for you. So I'll try them out, even though it seems silly.
I'm sure that works for any diagnosis.
Well, for many of them, again, not being, again, I'm not a trained professional. I've got a personal experience and 16 years of working in the industry, but I still know that there's a lot that I don't know about psychology and psychiatry. However, I've seen the behaviors of every form of, mental health and other disorder. So I have a lot of experience in in helping people.
I mean physical diagnosis.
Um, can you say it? Well, I heard physical diagnosis. I missed the beginning. I'm sorry.
I mean physical diagnosis.
Oh, well, diagnosis is a tricky subject because um, there's a diagnosis of, well, so for example, substance use disorder. Like, I don't want to give someone that diagnosis. I want them to give themselves that diagnosis. Also, to understand how mental health diagnoses work, it's not as scientific as you think. So imagine that there are buckets, like 10 different buckets, and each bucket is a different mental health diagnosis. And you take the symptoms of the individual and you say, okay, this symptom fits in that bucket, and this one fits in that bucket, and this one fits in that bucket. And whichever bucket most of the symptoms fit in, that's your disorder. It's literally how it works. I mean, the professionals have a lot more, science behind it. But at the end of the day, what we're talking about are symptoms are observed behaviors for the most part.
Mm.
And it's really hard to understand exactly why all behaviors are happening.
I totally understand because there are crossovers between physical disabilities.
Exactly. Crossovers are huge in ways I didn't even appreciate. You know, I've talked to a lot of psychiatrists and therapists and psychologists, and they all tell me the same thing, which I found to be amazing. That exercise, for example, can be as effective as medication for anxiety and depression. You wouldn't think about that. And you're like, oh, you know, if I'm anxious or depressed, you know, how is me going to the gym and doing something that's going to make me more anxious? And the idea of doing this makes me more depressed. How is this supposed to help? But there's something about the chemical, you know, a release of endorphins. You know, I'm not a biologist either, but you know, there's something that happens, you know, hormones get released when you work your muscles, and that can change your mood and your emotional state, which of course is your mental health.
How do you build mental discipline?
Um, Practice, you know, so the first step in mental discipline is really having someone break it down to me, you know, and like stop deciding for yourself what you're going to do. You know, my best decisions, my best ideas were horrible. So when I started taking the suggestions of other people, that became that my life got better. So originally it became really easy to take the suggestions of other people. But I didn't have to ask the same people the same question all the time. I always knew, now I know the answer. I asked the question once, I get the answer. So a lot of times the answer is like, you know, so imagine like if you're trying to eat healthy, right? So I like eating double stuffed Oreos. I just do. I know that's not good for me, you know, and I try not to go too crazy. But the point is, of course, now I'm way off on a tangent about double stuffed Oreos. Uh, I got to stop going off on tangents like that because I'm probably having a syndrome. Um, anyway, I completely crashed and burned on this question. I'm sorry, Kayla. If you could ask it again, I would appreciate that.
I was expecting cheeseburgers.
Oh yeah, from economics class. Yeah, I always use cheeseburgers as the example. Yeah, I wish I could remember why I was using food. Oh, healthy eating, right? So that's what mental discipline. Thank you, because now I got a second to get back on track. So that mental discipline, right? So if I know that I'm not supposed to like make that mistake, you know, again, I don't need to keep, hey, should I make this, you know, which way should I go? Like cheeseburger or no cheeseburger? You know, don't eat the cheeseburger if you're trying to eat healthy. Okay. I don't have to keep asking that question. And because I'm not asking anyone else for help about that question, it's really easy just to eat the cheeseburger, you know, and that's the thin edge of the wedge. I start doing what I want to do before I do what I need to do. You know, I start taking more than I give. I missed the last.
Satisfactory.
I keep talking while you ask the question.
Satisfactory.
Satisfactory. For this, yes. But as far as satisfactory for like recovery, no. I mean, I'm never generally satisfied. There's always more improvement.
I mean, it is like the satisfactory cheeseburger example.
Yes. Um, in economics class, we talk about utility and satisfaction, right? And so, yeah, I can have one cheeseburger and I get a lot of utility. What's the marginal utility out of the second cheeseburger, right? And do I get a little utility, but do I get any marginal utility out of the third cheeseburger? Probably not. Yeah, I think I've mentioned cheeseburgers when talking about diminishing marginal utility in economics class for the last 5 years. Um, uh, it's interesting because what you don't get diminishing marginal utility on is that mental discipline. That stuff just pays dividends the more you use it. So, for example, I now pay my bills on Friday mornings at 6 a.m. I hate paying bills. I don't want to, I want to spend my money. I don't want to send it to somebody else. So because I know I don't like doing this, and because I know that my anxiety and depression will go through the roof if I start like blowing off my bills and start running up debt again, I don't want that kind of mental health disorder. So I pay my bills immediately when I wake up on Friday because that's when my paycheck hits my account. I get it out of my account as fast as possible. So everything left in my account is my money. Now I don't have anxiety and depression of a situational nature. So that is mental discipline working on my mental health. Right. So I got to be disciplined about paying bills, just like I got to be disciplined about not eating double stuffed Oreos or just having one. Right. Um, and
Six,
it,
emotional regulation.
Yeah, because emotional regulation, in recovery, they call it the FITs. I think you can understand what the letter F stands for, right? Forget it, right? So, hey, I'm trying to, live healthy, I'm exercising, I'm eating fruits and vegetables and things like that. You know, that's the plan. But if I can't stay disciplined around it, um, then it's all going to fall apart. When do I find out that it falls apart? When do I make bad choices? When I'm angry or afraid. But those are the two big ones, right? So if I'm angry, whether I'm justified or not, this is why justifiable anger is so dangerous, right? Because I might be absolutely justified in my anger, but if I drink over that, and again, I call that suicide on the installment plan, right? If I go back to killing myself with alcohol because I allowed someone else to make me angry, or I allowed the television to make me angry, or I allowed my dog to make me angry. Well, if I cannot, if I don't understand how dangerous that is, then my emotions aren't regulated. So I got to be emotionally intelligent and I got to be mentally disciplined so that when I get angry, I can say, you know what? Let me call my friend and tell him how I'm angry, and he'll talk me down. Let me open up my book of daily meditations and let me see if there's a positive thought, right? Because I'm like Velcro for negative stuff, but I'm like a Teflon pan for the positive stuff. You can give me compliments, I'll forget them in 5 minutes, right? But if I think you might have given me like a backhanded compliment, or maybe you don't like me as much as I think you're supposed to, I'll hate you, right? These are the delusional thoughts that are part of my mental health disorder.
What is good behavior?
So good behavior is doing the next right thing. So, like, can I be, a good person tomorrow? No. I mean, I'm living in the here and now. So I can't be all bent out of shape, about my intentions. Like, I promise I will be good in the future. No, that doesn't matter. You
Mm.
know, and I was a horrible person in the past. That doesn't matter either. Right. The only thing that matters is what do I do next? So if I do the next right thing, not only is my life going to get better, but people are going to like me, right? Maybe I'll get promoted. But it's a virtuous cycle. When I do the things I need to do instead of what I want to do, when I think about other people more than I think about myself, my life gets better.
What assists you to be effective in your role?
Um, a lot of patience, and quite frankly, experience. When people talk to me and they're like, it's easy for you, college professor, program director, and this, and it's like, no, I'm the alcoholic that wound up in the burn unit that got divorced and got locked up a bunch of times. Like, that's who I am. I can't get wrapped up in being identified in who I was or who I'm gonna be. All I can do is just give more than I take. And if that's not good enough for some people, there's probably something wrong with that.
Please discuss the secret of success when it comes to managing mental health issues such as substance use disorder. Please discuss the secret of success.
All right. I'm really glad you asked that because I literally tell this to people all the time. And I usually whisper and I lean in and I go, I'm going to tell you the secret to life. Are you ready? Do the things you need to do when you don't want to. Now, you're kind of well, duh, but this is literally why the majority of my clients, at the dual diagnosed treatment center, why they're there. um, because they're either unwilling or incapable of making good decisions, typically because they have no idea. If they don't believe they got a substance use disorder, what the heck are they doing in treatment? They're furious. Right? I'm not mentally ill. I don't have a substance use disorder. Let me go back to college. Let me go back to high school. Right? They would be furious. So when you're angry, the only thing that makes you happy when you're angry is doing what you want to do. Right? Can you imagine trying to help somebody else when you're angry? Most people don't want to do that.
How do other mental disorders affect recovery?
Um, well, certainly, like I've been struggling with anxiety recently. That's one of the reasons why I changed roles and now I train case managers instead of talk to parents and clients as much. I was having panic attacks and things like that. So these are, this is, I don't think this is a symptom of my substance use disorder. I think this is, a stress induced mental health condition. Stress is real. The fact that I was able to do this for 16 years, you know, flat out, I think was pretty good. It does have an effect. It's been about 6 months since I started training all the case managers and not being the program director. I think I could go back to my old role now. I'm not saying I want to, and also I'm a little older. This is great for a young person who really has, that fire. I get fired up, but I go to sleep at 8 o'clock. If you're having a problem at 10 o'clock at night and you call me, I'm asleep. So, time for the younger guys.
Thank you, Peter, for doing this with me. It was great to have you on. Please share this talk show with your family, friends, clients, and colleagues. Everyone watching, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and share on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.